The cultural repercussions of the Harvey Weinstein case continue to ripple through society. Our next guest has written, I think, a very important and eloquent piece about it, and about one aspect of Weinstein's life that I think deserves further reflection and discussion. Thomas Frank is a historian and author. His books include What's the Matter with Kansas, and his most recent book is Listen Liberal. He has written a piece for The Guardian entitled What Harvey Weinstein Tells Us About the Liberal World. So first of all, Tom Frank, thanks for joining us.
You got it, RJ. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And when it comes to Weinstein, I think what I got out of your piece and many things, but when I sent it out on social media, what I characterized it as was a piece about what I would call the liberalism of privilege, a certain type of liberal activism that comes with a very exalted social role of wealth and prestige, and in this case, cultural prestige as well. Is that a fair description of what you were talking about here?
Yeah, very much so. I'll tell you something. I'd never heard of Harvey Weinstein before this scandal broke, and it was on the front page of the New York Times. And I've seen a lot of. It turned out I've seen a lot of his movies, but I never heard of the guy. I never thought about the guy. And first thing you realize when you start digging into his, looking at his career, is that he's this super donor to Democratic politicians. Forever hosting fundraisers, and giving money to good causes, hosting events for good causes, and he's personal friends with a lot of these politicians, and once you start reading up on these stories, so that's what I did. I read everything I could get my hands on about his political involvement and his political views. And you realize that he is a very particular kind of Democrat, that it's not your sort of ordinary liberalness. It's just this very different thing. And by the way, it's kind of funny because I did far more research on this than I needed to do. I really went way overboard, in order to produce those 800 words that finally became the column. So
the ratio of research per word was way higher than usual.
Yeah, it was a little bit skewed this time. But for example, this guy basically, Harvey Weinstein, wasn't interested, or doesn't seem to have been very interested in politics before Bill Clinton came along. And he really liked Bill Clinton, still does. And you find there's a TV interview that he did with Bill Clinton a little while ago on CNN, a couple of years ago actually, where it's weird that CNN allows things like this to happen, but they let Harvey Weinstein be the substitute host. I think it was the Piers Morgan show, and Weinstein interviewed Bill Clinton, and in the interview was just what is the right term for it? I mean, he was just basically genuflecting before Clinton, just abasing himself. And he said, you were the first. I don't have it in front of me here, but basically he liked Bill Clinton because he was cool. That was the word he used, cool. It just gets worse from there. But there's all sorts of really interesting aspects to chapters in this guy's political life. One of them is that Barack Obama in 2011, this is right after the Tea Party movement had basically come in and, remember what he called the shellacking, really beat the Democrats badly in the 2010 midterm elections. And Obama was giving a speech somewhere talking about what is wrong with our politics. It was in Michigan. He was touring a factory, and he gave a speech in which he sort of lamented the sad state of our politics. And if you read the story, the very next thing he did, he got on a plane and went to a fundraiser at Harvey Weinstein's house. And it's like, oh, Barack Obama, oh my God. Well, you can see what's wrong with our politics. It's right in front of you.
Right. No. I think it's really important, actually, and you know, I should say that, you know, what I think you've identified and written about is not, you know, the very important, you know, gender dimension of this story, but something different, something that ties into your book, Listen Liberal. You know, the notion that the new Democratic Party is an institution of elites. And it's interesting, Tom, because I have a very different experience. I lived in Los Angeles for about 15 years. I knew people who were part of that world, the film world, so with the industry, as they call it, I had some overlap with it. I used to go to Hollywood events where different progressives could come and make their pitches for their projects. Once in a while I did a pitch and never got anywhere, by the way. But so I kind of a little bit knew that milieu. And one, everybody knew about Harvey. I mean, that was just like a given, even though I've never met the guy. Number two, what you're talking about with Obama, you know, I lived up in the hills. Once in a while I would have trouble getting home because Obama or Hillary or somebody would be doing a fundraiser at some billionaire producer's house, and the road would be blocked because the valets were, you know, in the white tuxes.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, I've never been, obviously I don't live in Los Angeles, but I was once driving in Washington by the Saudi ambassador's house, and they were doing that exact same thing. And they basically hijacked a public road in order to, you know, for their valets to park cars. And the traffic was backed up for miles. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. It's kind of a public-private partnership of traffic or something. But the...
yeah, that's right.
So I do know exactly what you're talking about. And I think it's important because I think that, you know, I think that somewhere along the line, the Democratic Party went from being the working guys party, you know, you go back and you read your history of Roosevelt and all these sort of moving, well, I didn't know nothing about politics, so this guy stood for me, he cared about me, you know, the wealthy guy who grew up, you know, in rarefied atmosphere of wealth, FDR, people connected with him. Now it feels like the Democratic Party, or certainly the establishment, has become the kind of celebrity party, you know, that it's about making sure that Beyonce or Jay-Z or Lady Gaga or whoever, or Harvey, shows up at your event. And I feel, am I reading too much into it to think that maybe this is one of the reasons why the party hasn't done so well lately?
That is exactly right. I mean, you've put it very well there. This is a huge part of the problem. And if you look at the politics of the people that you just described, they can at times really care deeply about issues, but the issues that they care about rarely have anything to do with you know, the sort of day-to-day existence of ordinary people in this country. You know, the problems that ordinary people have, making their lives better, improving their day-to-day existence. That's not what this kind of liberalism is about. It's you know, it's about something else entirely. And it's a kind of liberalism that is practiced, as you just said, it's practiced at these fundraisers in fancy places. So in researching Harvey Weinstein, by the way, this is, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You know, did you, I don't know if we ever talked about Listen Liberal, but Listen Liberal has a whole chapter about Martha's Vineyard, because, you know, this island off the coast, I don't know if you're familiar with it, this island off the coast of Massachusetts, where a lot of rich people go on vacation. And for whatever reason, it tends to be a hangout for Democratic politicians. Both the Clintons and the Obamas vacationed there every summer that they were in the White House, because they're able to both go on vacation and have fundraisers every single night. Anyhow, of course, when you start reading Harvey Weinstein's story, of course he has a house on Martha's Vineyard, and of course he does fundraisers for, you know, for these various figures that I mentioned. Then there's another angle to all this, which is the just the incredible, unbelievable hypocrisy of the man. You know, that I don't really understand, and I don't pretend to have any insight on. But he was pretty close with Hillary Clinton, among others. This is a man that is accused, you understand, of epic sexual harassment. You know, dozens and dozens of cases. And he's friends with Hillary Clinton, the sort of leading feminist politician of our time. That's really screwy. That's really weird.
Well, I would say, just to jump in for a second, Tom, I would say that in that relationship, I would argue that the hypocrisy runs both ways, that you can't proclaim yourself, position yourself as a leading feminist politician of the time, given the rumors about Harvey, and then in good conscience be great pals with him either if you're Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't put this in the story, but look, the Clintons were very close with this guy. The Clintons are very intelligent people. They're not stupid. Same with Barack Obama. They surely were aware of the kind of rumors swirling around this guy.
They made jokes about it,
and they just didn't care. That didn't apparently bother them. By the way, talking about his fundraisers, I think the best part of the story that I wrote, the best quote in the story, we can talk about some of the other funny things that I found that I didn't use, but the best part is this old Roger Ebert story from the 90s about a party that Harvey Weinstein threw in France on the Riviera at Cannes, right? And it's the sickest thing in the world. He's auctioning off a massage from Heidi Klum.
Yeah,
we now know, right? I mean, I don't think Heidi Klum is one of the women who's come forward, or she has, her name hasn't been mentioned. But this guy had a thing about massages, right? We know that now, or we don't know it. That's what he's sort of accused of, I should say. He had an alleged thing about massages, and here he is auctioning them off, on the Riviera with these various movie stars in attendance, raising money for AIDS, for a good cause. Ooh, the whole thing is so creepy and weird.
Yeah, creepy is exactly the word that comes to mind. And again, we're talking with Thomas Frank about his write-up on Harvey Weinstein. And, you wrote, countless people who should have known better are proclaiming their surprise. It is at his alleged abuses, but in truth, their blindness is even more sweeping than that. They're lost in these days in a house of moral mirrors, weeping tears of admiration for their own virtue and good taste. Great writing, I would say, but also it gets to, I think, what Harvey Weinstein learned to do, and a lot of people who are, real predators of other kinds, financial predators, hedge funders, Ron Burkle, Bill Clinton's great friend, and so on. I think what they learned to do is, virtue signaling, if you want to use that term, and a kind of tribal affiliation. Yeah, I'll get the place next to yours on the vineyard, Martha's Vineyard. I'll do this, I'll do that. I'll fundraise for this cause or that cause. Some of them, as you say, quite good causes. And we will all be part of the in-group together.
Yes, this is pretty much directly what from Listen Liberal. So the second to last chapter of Listen Liberal is me trying to understand the Clinton Foundation. Okay, it's not a foundation in the traditional sense of of what we think of as a charitable organization. What they do is they hold these meetings around the world with I went to one of them, and I describe it in the book, but it was one that Hillary Clinton was presiding over. This is before she was running for president. And they get together these sort of paragons of moral virtue, these people who are just unquestionably good. In the old days, it was always Nelson Mandela. He's gone now, but it used to be Nelson Mandela. These days, it's more likely to be someone like Bono. Even his name means good,
Right,
and then they get these sort of these figures of great moral virtue together with people of rather questionable virtue, financiers, stuff like that. And the virtue of the one party is sort of supposed to rub off on the other. They have their sins forgiven, sort of.
Right.
It's like the church in the Middle Ages where you could buy forgiveness for things. And that's kind of what
indulgences they were called.
Yeah, indulgences, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this this philanthropic model is all about. It's the selling of indulgences. So in the book I called it liberalism offsets. They're selling liberalism offsets, It's sort of these predators.
Right.
And Harvey Weinstein is a perfect example of that.
I went to a Clinton Foundation event, and I think it was 2010, and I couldn't get, I pitched a story. I couldn't get anybody to pick it up. Nobody wanted to cross the Clintons, and, or my pitch was lousy. It was another possibility, but
you and me both, my brother. Since writing that book, I am, I know what it's like to be shunned, let's
No,
say.
I know, but one of the things that struck me was that at one of the Clinton Foundation events, it might have been 2011, they had Gary Cohn, now a Trump advisor, president of Goldman Sachs at that time, number 2 at Goldman Sachs, the most vile corporate predator with massive evidence of fraud, massive fines paid for fraud, talking with one of the principal triggers of the financial crisis. It's the kind of behavior it represented. Sitting down with Bill Clinton, and the topic of their conversation was how to recover from the financial crisis.
Oh yeah, that's what you want Goldman Sachs to be telling you about. Yeah,
right. It's like it's like talking to the captain of the Exxon Valdez about oil cleanup or something. It's just like
I'll give Goldman is actually a perfect example of what I mean, because they are, they have a lot to answer for, and they tend to try to put their name on very obviously good causes. I was over at the Smithsonian the other day, and they have in one of the museums, I think it's in the American History Museum, they have the actual lunch counter where the sit-ins happened back in the early 1960s. They got it out of the Woolworths or whatever and brought it to the museum, and it's funded. The exhibit is funded by Goldman Sachs.
Well, I was in the British Museum, and unfortunately we're going to have to stop. I could talk to you all afternoon. I was in the British Museum last month, and there was an exhibit on the history of money funded by Citigroup. So this is the world we live in now. Well, as I say, I could talk to you all afternoon because this is a really important topic, and you're the guy who's got his finger on it. So Thomas Frank, author of Listen Liberal and a recent piece, what Harvey Weinstein tells us about the liberal world. Thanks for coming on the program.
You got it, RJ, anytime.